Hello, everybody, and welcome to Catholic Answers Live. Happy first Friday of Lent to you all. Hope you're enjoying your fish, your alligator, even your capybara. I'm learning is what you're allowed, something you're allowed to eat during Lent. And hope you enjoy 2 hours today of Ask Me Anything with our very own Jimmy Akin. The number to call is 888-318-7884. But the lines are already full. People lining up to talk to our very own senior apologist, author, speaker, debater, and podcaster extraordinaire, Jimmy Akin. Welcome back to the show, Jimmy.
How you doing, Thomas?
I am doing great. You know, I feel like it's a better Lenten Friday than normal. I don't know why. I'm not quite as hungry as normal. Maybe that's not in the spirit of Lent. I'm not sure, but I'm powering through, probably on the adrenaline of, filling in to host this show again.
So all of our questions today are coming from TikTok. Is that right?
Not quite. I do have one down at the bottom of our doc here, but we do have quite a bit of calls on the line. Before we get to them, Jimmy, of course, is the host, proprietor of several podcasts, including the Jimmy Akin podcast, The Mysteries of the Faith, available through Catholic.com, any podcast app, and of course, of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World. Jimmy, what do we have coming up on each of those?
Well, this previous Monday on the Jimmy Akin podcast, we had a look at the mystery of the heart. Today we often think about thought as being associated with the brain rather than the heart. But back in biblical times, they tended to associate thought with the heart rather than the brain. And so we take a look at that and what science has to say, and it's a little more complex than people commonly assume. Also, in terms of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, today we had an episode of Patrons Questions come out, and a lot of the questions were asked by the children of our patrons. So it's a children's questions focused one in which I take on questions like, well, if Santa Claus dies, would he go to heaven or not?
Well, I think we know that about Saint Nicholas, don't we? But the fictional character Santa Claus, that might be a little thorny.
Yeah, whoa, dude.
I'm sorry.
We got
the hypothetically fictional character Santa Claus may or may not be.
you want to be a little more circumspect. We've got children listening whose parents may or may not have decided what they want to do on that subject.
Very, very true. We could say that a book maybe is more fictional than certain other conceptions of Santa Claus. Anyway, what else is coming up on the Jimmy Akin podcast?
Well, I've got a lot of plans, but we'll be talking about those in times to come.
Okay, cool. And then Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, what is on the horizon there?
Well, let's take a look on the schedule. Coming up next Friday, we're going to be looking at the UFO observables. Back in 2017, when the ATIP program from the Defense Department was announced, it was revealed that there had been 5 characteristics that UFOs, or UAPs as they're calling them now, display that we can't really duplicate. And it turns out that there is a single technology that, if it can be invented, would explain all 5 of the UFO observables. And so we're going to be talking about what that technology is and how it would explain them.
Fantastic. Sounds like a good old-fashioned UFO episode of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World that all his fans will gobble up eagerly. And you can become a fan, too, if you just listen to Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World anywhere you get your podcasts, and especially on Jimmy Akin's YouTube channel. As I said, it's Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin today on Catholic Answers Live. And by the way, my name is Thomas Graff. I'm filling in for Cy Kellett today. He will be back with us shortly. Of course, don't you worry. Normally, I manage the social media here, which is probably why Jimmy mentioned that we might have a TikTok question coming up later. But for now, most of the show is going to be your calls from the phones, which are all filled up. So, Jimmy, shall we dive into them?
Let's go.
Okie doke. Let's go to Ohio, where Christopher is watching on YouTube. Christopher, welcome to the show.
Hey, hi. Thanks for taking my call. My question is, if someone venially sins by a category of sin that is by its nature grave matter, has one committed a grave offense that he's only venially culpable for? If so, does one have a similar degree of responsibility to avoid such sins as mortal sins?
Okay, so the answer to the first question, if you sin venially in a category that's potentially mortal, have you committed a grave sin? No, you haven't. You've committed a venial sin. So to give an example, the category of theft is potentially grave if there's someone who is, let's say they've got $1,000 to their name, and that's all the money they have in the world, and I steal their $1,000. Well, then I've deprived them of their means of living, and that's a grave sin. So that would be an example of a category that's potentially grave. However, if there's someone who's rich, let's say Elon Musk, and I steal a nickel from him, it's still in the same category as theft, but there's no way I'm doing grave damage to Elon Musk by stealing a nickel from him. And so that would be only a venial sin. It has what's referred to as parvity of matter or smallness of matter. So it is not a grave sin, even though the category is potentially grave.
Are there, for categories that are by nature grave, would that be the same or would that be different?
Well, there is a common opinion that all categories against the Sixth Commandment, or that all sins against the Sixth Commandment are in principle grave, but they can be rendered light through various circumstances, like inattention and things like that. So if a person is so the sixth category is thou shalt not commit adultery, and into this category go all sexual sins. And like I've said, there is a common opinion that every category sexual sin is in principle grave, but a particular sin may not be grave through one or another reason. Like if someone is in their thought life is starting to have fantasies about having sex with someone they're not married to, and they catch themselves, so these aren't fully deliberate, then it's not going to be a grave sin. It would at most be venial. So it's still not a grave sin in that case. It's not a mortal sin.
Christopher, thanks so much for that call. Thanks for starting us off on this Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin. The number to call is 888-318-7884 if you want to ask a question of Jimmy. And the next person asking a question is Manny, calling from Sacramento, California. Manny, also watching on YouTube. Manny, welcome to Catholic Answers Live. Go ahead with your question.
Thank you. My question is, what is the meaning of Genesis chapter 49, verses 14 and 15?
Okay, so we want to start by reading the verses. Genesis 49, verses 14 and 15. This is part of the final speech it's a prophetic speech given by Jacob, the patriarch Jacob, as he's about to die. So this is Israel himself. And it's a prophetic speech that deals with the fates of his 12 sons and the tribes that come from them. And verses 14 and 15 deal with Issachar, the patriarch Issachar here, and the tribe that is known as the tribe of Issachar. And it says, Issachar is a strong donkey crouching between the sheepfolds. He saw a resting place that was good and land that was pleasant, so he bowed his shoulder to the burden and became a servant of forced labor. Well, without doing further study on this passage, it seems to me that we have a recognition that the tribe of Issachar was a tribe that found good land, that inherited good land when the 12 tribes came into the promised land, and the people of Issachar were willing to undertake labor in order to have the benefits of living in that good land. At least that's what occurs to me off the top of my head.
Manny, what do you think of that?
All right. Thank you.
Sure.
Thanks for the call, Manny. It's Ask Me Anything, as I said, with Jimmy Akin. Again, that'll open up a line as our previous caller drops off. So if you want to call quick, because the lines are full. The number is 888-318-7884. I want to tell you guys real quick that here at Catholic Answers, we're always we're always on the lookout for the next apologists, but also just the next partners in the vineyard, as our President Chris Check likes to put it, of who is trying to reach souls in ever ancient, ever new ways. And one of those is the Holy Habits app that we are partnering with now. Holy Habits is a Catholic spiritual growth app designed to help users grow in their faith, develop their virtues, track their spiritual progress. And it's rooted in time-tested principles of spiritual direction and the wisdom of the saints. But it uses newer tools to help you do that. So you can use its spiritual growth tracker, for instance, to log your faith-based goals. You say, I want to pray this many times a day. I want to read this much of the Bible. You can track that. You can use AI to give you some personalized recommendations based on Catholic teachings, of course. You can look at daily gospel reflections and personalize saintly wisdom, read scripture, reflect on the faith, and receive insights from the saints that are tailored to the spiritual journey you're walking on. You can log your confessions and keep track of the vices you're trying to battle over time. All this and lots more. There's a lot more that you can find on the Holy Habits app. And we are offering it for 3 months for free. Visit Catholic.com, click the banner at the top to see how you can do that. Again, Catholic.com, click the banner at the top to find out how you can get 3 months of the Holy Habits app for free. Once again, it's Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin. We're going to take a quick break, and we'll be right back with more questions from Catholic Answers Live.
Catch Catholic Answers Live anytime at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects home buyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Are you a coffee drinker? If so, you can now enjoy a coffee roasted to perfection by the Carmelite monks of Wyoming. Delicious Mystic Monk coffee is roasted and prepared by monks in a hidden cloistered monastery and is available in over 25 varieties. All Mystic Monk coffees are works of perfection and labors of love. For more information on how to purchase Mystic Monk coffee, visit mysticmonkcoffee.com. That's mysticmonkcoffee.com.
Proclaiming the faith, changing lives.
The year was 1980. Mother Angelica, who is hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, orders a satellite dish and transmission equipment. A wealthy benefactor gives her the $250,000 letter of credit she needs to apply for an FCC license to broadcast.
To learn more about Mother Angelica's life and the history of EWTN, visit EWTN.com/Mother Angelica.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. It's Ask Me Anything with our very own senior apologist, Jimmy Akin here. My name is Thomas Graff, normally running the social media here at Catholic Answers, but today taking another break to fill in for Cy Kellett. Once again, the number to call is 888-318-7884 when the lines are open, but everybody wants to talk to Jimmy today for good reason. So we're going to move right along to Nashville, Tennessee, where Lindsay is watching on YouTube. So many people watching on YouTube today. That's great news. Lindsay, hi. Welcome to Catholic Answers Live.
Hi. Thanks for taking my call.
Happy to.
So my question is, in regards to NFP, I know that it's valid to use NFP to avoid pregnancy if you have grave reason to do so. And I'm curious, how do you discern whether or not you have grave reason?
Well, you will hear some folks say that you need a grave reason to use NFP, but that's not actually what Humanae Vitae, the 1968 papal document that deals with contraception, says. Instead, it uses a different test. It says that recourse to natural cycles can be used for a just reason. And a just reason is any reason that is not illegal. And so so the actual standard that we find in the relevant document is a much lower standard than what you sometimes hear people saying.
Lindsay, does that clarify your question for you a bit?
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thanks so much.
Okay, thank you for the call, Lindsay. Thank you very much. Once again, it's Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin, and our next caller is again watching on YouTube, Gabe calling from Oregon. Gabe, go ahead with your question for Jimmy Akin.
Hello, Mr. Thomas, Mr. Jimmy. My question is very quick. I was watching a Trinity debate between a Trinitarian and a non-Trinitarian, and he posed the question the following way. Was Yahweh ever tempted in relation to Jesus in the desert based off of James 1:13, where it says God cannot be tempted with evil things? How would you answer that as a Catholic, and what resources can you provide to help me better answer questions such as that?
Well, the first thing is we need to get straight what is actually going on in the so-called temptation of Jesus in the desert. The term temptation, the term that gets translated temptation in Greek, is the same as the Greek term for test. And so you could either translate this as Jesus was tempted in the desert or as Jesus was tested in the desert. I would say this is certainly the way I've always looked at the passage, is that what's really going on there is the devil is testing Jesus to find out if he's the Son of God or not. He doesn't know the answer to that question yet. And so what he's trying to do is present Jesus with things that would tempt ordinary people, and that an ordinary person who's not the Son of God might give way to. And if Jesus gives in to one of these, tests, like turn stones into bread or whatever so you can have some food to eat, then that would reveal that Jesus is in fact not the Son of God. but because he's the all holy Son of God, he's not going to he's not going to give in to any of these things. And consequently, when the devil repeatedly fails to get him to give in to a temptation, Jesus passes the test, and his supreme holiness as the Son of God is revealed. So I would say that that Yahweh, and Jesus is Yahweh, I would say that that Yahweh was not tempted in the sense of having disordered desires in this situation or in any other situation. Instead, he was tested in the sense that he was presented with things that an ordinary person might give into, but that Yahweh would not give into. And so I think whether or not you would say Yahweh was tempted in this situation is going to depend on how you're using the term. But fundamentally, it's not possible for Yahweh, either considered in the person of Jesus or more broadly, to actually have disordered desires. And so Yahweh can't be tempted in that sense.
Gabe, does that help you out?
It does a lot. Thank you very much. I have something else, but I will ask it at a different time. Thank you so much.
Okay, great. Look forward to hearing you again, Gabe. Thanks for calling. Again, another line opens up for calling Jimmy Akin. So call 888-318-7884 if you'd like to have Jimmy answer your question right here. Let's go next to Jamie calling from Alabama. Once again, Jamie is watching on YouTube. We are having such a strong YouTube audience today. Jamie, go ahead. Thanks for joining us from YouTube.
Hi. So I feel kind of bad because my question's a little bit silly, but in Star Trek, they have the Prime Directive, and me and my daughter were arguing about whether that would follow like Catholic theology as far as witnessing, and that if you followed the Prime Directive.
In terms of witnessing?
Well, like preaching, teaching people about Jesus if you're following the Prime Directive and not interfering in other like alien cultures.
Oh, well, so the Prime Directive in Star Trek is principally about technology. And so and it's varied over time exactly what constitutes the Prime Directive. In the early days, in Those Old Scientists, in the original series, basically the Prime Directive only applied to civilizations that hadn't yet developed warp drive. And so if a civilization was confined to a single planet, then you didn't want to share information with them that would be technologically disruptive. Later, by the time of the next generation, they had developed a more expansive understanding of the Prime Directive that's like, don't interfere in the natural development of a civilization. And that was always irrational. There are elements to the Prime Directive that make sense. You know, you don't want to give nuclear bombs to people who are in the Stone Age. They're not going to be able to use them responsibly. So, you know, there are elements of truth that are reasonable to the Prime Directive, but by the time of the next generation, it was just being applied in all kinds of crazy ways, most notably in one of the next gen movies where basically they're applying the Prime Directive to a group of people who live on a planet that has magic rings that make people immune from aging, and they're applying it to a culture that just has a few hundred people at most in it. And the problems with the Prime Directive became so obvious that in one of the short treks where it's Spock's first day on the Enterprise, he's talking to the first officer, number one, and he asks her, has it ever occurred to you that the Prime Directive is morally indefensible? And she basically says, if you care about your Starfleet career, never say that again. But that's an acknowledgement from the writers of the show that they've kind of written themselves into a corner with the Prime Directive. Now, if you take the next generation understanding of the Prime Directive of not interfering with the natural development of a culture, then that does potentially come into conflict with the Christian duty to bear witness to Jesus Christ. As Christians, we have a responsibility to share the gospel of Jesus Christ with everybody, and that's going to apply, presumably to people on other planets too. Now, that doesn't mean you do so immediately. I could see it being reasonable to say, okay, well, this is a pretty warped civilization, so we're not really going to tell them that we're aliens until they're ready for it. But then once they're ready for that knowledge, then we would want to share the message of Jesus Christ with them as well. You could even argue that they need the message of Jesus Christ earlier than that. So I do see that although there are elements or versions of the Prime Directive that are reasonable, that there are also versions of the Prime Directive that are going to be in conflict with the Christian duty to evangelize.
By the way, Jamie, don't feel bad about calling Catholic Answers with a moral theology question coming from Star Trek, because I don't know if there's a better show you could have called into it. I mean, not only is Jimmy an apologist of over 30 years, but you also, one of the podcasts you host is also about Star Trek, right?
Oh, yeah. And in general, I treat all questions straight. It doesn't matter what the question is to me. I'll give it a straight answer. So Star Trek morality questions, totally fine with me.
Yeah, don't feel bad about that, Jamie. Please call in again with all of your Star Trek moral theology questions. Love to take them. Okay, let's go on. Again, it's Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin, and that means anything, including moral theology questions coming from Star Trek. Brent does not have one of those questions, but Brent is calling from Arkansas, watching on, guess where, YouTube. Brent, go ahead with your question for Jimmy Akin.
Hey, Jimmy. So, quick question. I'm about 2/3 Catholic, going through RCIA right now and coming up on first confession. And having been baptized in another faith 20 some odd years ago, so I've got to cover a multitude of sins from a very long time. I was looking for a few pointers maybe on, is it permissible to bring a list in? What length of time should I expect for a first confession? Maybe some pointers that you could provide there.
Okay, so I've been through the same thing. I became Catholic as an adult, and I had been baptized in another tradition. So, I had a first confession that I had to go through in a similar situation, and it is absolutely permissible to bring a list of what you intend to confess, not just for your first confession, but for any confession. What you want to do, though, is be very sure that that list does not fall into the wrong hands. And so if you, if it's, let's say it's a written list, on a piece of paper, then I would suggest either burning the piece of paper afterwards or tearing it into tiny little bits and flushing it down a toilet or something like that, so it doesn't fall into the hands of someone who shouldn't be reading it. Another security measure that you could take, and this would also apply to if it's a list on your phone, is using code in the list. So you don't write exactly what it is you need to confess. Instead, you write something that's maybe an abbreviation or some other word that will remind you of what it is you need to confess, but you don't use the exact word itself. And that way, even if it does fall into somebody's hands that shouldn't be reading it, then it won't make any sense to them because you put it in code. So that's what I'd have to say about the list. In terms of how much time, well, it really depends on you and how much you need to confess. You mentioned it's 20 years. One thing I would say is you don't need to explain circumstances. All you need to say is, this is what I did, and I did it this much to the best of your ability. You don't need to mention anything surrounding that. And if you follow that principle, you can keep even a 20-year confession fairly short.
We'll be right back with more Catholic Answers Live.
We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron.
Deepen your connection to the Church's holy days and seasons while you draw on the wisdom of the Church Fathers. Feasts of Our Fathers, the new book from Mike Aquilina and Adam Lucas, is a treasury of history, prayers, insights, and lessons that will bring you closer to the earliest of Catholic traditions. Take your prayer life and your solidarity with the Church, past and present, to a new level. Order your copy of Feasts of Our Fathers today at shop.catholic.com.
When the resurrected Jesus appeared to disciples on the road to Emmaus, they didn't recognize him until the breaking of the bread. The same is true today. In the Holy Eucharist, we really meet Jesus. In The Eucharist is Really Jesus, author Joe Heschmeyer explains how knowing Jesus in the Eucharist is the key to understanding all of Christian faith. Order your copy of The Eucharist is Really Jesus today at shop.catholic.com or get it at a good Catholic bookstore.
It's groovy music time, which means halfway through the hour with Jimmy Akin on Ask Me Anything show. This is Catholic Answers Live. My name is Thomas Graff. I'm the social media manager most of the time here at Catholic Answers, but on the occasion sometimes when Cy Kellett is out, they ask me to slip in just for 2 hours and host the show instead. As I said, Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin, senior apologist here at Catholic Answers, author of tons of articles on Catholic.com, author of books like A Daily Defense, the Bible is a Catholic Book, The Words of Eternal Life. One of the most popular books I see people still talking about online in my social media work is The Fathers Know Best. People still go crazy for Jimmy Akin's book, The Fathers Know Best. All of those available at shop.catholic.com. And, of course, we are taking your calls here on Catholic Answers Live. For Jimmy Akin, all the lines are full, so we're going to keep on going right to Brent, calling from right in Jimmy's backyard in Arkansas. It's a bigger state than that, I know. But
actually, we did Brent's call.
You are so right. We are not in your backyard anymore. I'm sorry about that. We're actually going to Washington, where Maura is listening. First caller not watching on YouTube. Wow. Listening on KHSS instead. Maura, go ahead with your question for Jimmy Akin.
Yes, hello. At the end of Mass last weekend, the celebrant took a couple of minutes to tell us about recent changes to immigration regulations that will have a drastic effect on priests in our diocese, many of whom came from Mexico. My sister in another state told me this will affect priests in her diocese who came from Africa. I didn't understand well what our priest described. I have the impression that people without permanent residency will need to leave the United States and may not be able to return for many years. Priests here are stretched thin, even with this extra help, and all of us will be greatly affected if their number decreases. Can you help me better understand what changes were made and how priests from other countries will be affected?
Well, I'll do what I can, but I have to tell you, I'm not a legal expert, and I'm not familiar with what the changes you're referring to. I'm aware of efforts to deport people who are in the country illegally, especially if they've committed other crimes. And most priests who are in this country are here legally. They have a visa to come into the country. And so most of them are not going to be in any danger of deportation. Now, it is for people who are in the country legally. It is periodically required that they leave the country, even if it's just like for a day, and then come back in and get a new entry visa. And that's nothing new. That's been the case with lots of people, who are in the country legally. it's been that way for years and years and years. Now, there may have been some kind of category shift that means that priests are going to have to do this too, whereas previously they did not. But I would think that this is not going to be a major thing, because most part of the reason for the exit and return policy that the United States has had is to create a point where there can be a reassessment of, is this someone we want in the country? Do they have a job here? Things like that. And all of the priests who are in this country working for dioceses, who come from somewhere else, they've all got a job here, and they all would be considered desirable aliens. And so as far as I'm aware, this would be a formality that priests might need to go through who are not citizens of the United States, or who don't have a certain kind of immigration status here. But I wouldn't anticipate this causing major problems for them, because they're clearly here with a purpose. They have specialized skills. They have a job here, things like that. I don't think it's going to be a problem for most of them. It's just an extra formality they may need to go through.
Okay. Thank you for your help.
Yep. Thank you for the call, Maura. Please do call again anytime. It's Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin, and our next caller is Tom, calling from Michigan. Tom is listening on Ave Maria Radio. Tom, welcome to the show. Tom, do we have you? Okay, we don't have Tom right now. Let's hang on the line, Tom. We're going to check back in with you. Make sure you're still there. In the meantime, Rob is listening in Westmont, Pennsylvania. I believe that's Pennsylvania. Watching on YouTube. Rob
should be PA, but PN is probably Pennsylvania.
Yeah, not Pensacola. Surely that's not even a state. Westmont, Pennsylvania, listening on YouTube. Rob, do we have you?
Well, hopefully you do. I mean, I'm just floating out here in the wind. It's cold out here, but anyway.
Yeah, we got your voice at least.
If I may say, thank you for being the first host to wear a cool shirt. Jimmy, you might want to take notes.
Oh, we don't have to bag on Jimmy's shirt.
Well, thank you for calling in, Rob, and I look forward to talking to you again some other time.
No. Let's keep Rob here. I like him. I like Rob. Now, we don't need to bag on Jimmy's look. Thanks for the compliment on the Hawaiian shirt. I've been wearing one every Friday since the start of college, so I'm glad someone is finally giving me props for that. But Jimmy's purple is iconic, and I don't think that's going to go anywhere. So thanks anyway, Rob.
If I may, real quick, I have two questions. I'll be quick. First, I am a lapsed Catholic trying to get back into the religion. I need to know if there's a book, a source on Catholic traditions I can refer to that will help me to reconnect with the church. I tried a couple of years ago and failed miserably. Well, I think I'm going to do it this time a bit more grown up, so I would like to, A, do that. And then B, should I go back to confession? Of course I should go back to confession, but should I redo my life's confession to catch me up to where I am today? Because I really do think I wasn't taking it seriously, and it was an abomination disguised as trying to be good, but I guess I really, to be a grown-up and to look in the mirror, I guess I should redo everything. Thank you very, very much for your time, gentlemen. Again, very cool shirt. Need to leave a picture. I'm sure everybody, will like it. And you guys have a great weekend. And have a wonderful Easter.
You're the best, Rob. Thanks. Jimmy?
Okay, so in regard to a book of traditions to reconnect with the Catholic Church, I'm not exactly sure what would fit that bill. I mean, there are various books about Catholic practices and so forth. But fundamentally, the thing that really occurs to me is you may want to read the Catechism. especially if you don't have a copy of the Catechism, I'd get a copy of the Catechism of the Catholic Church. It's not just traditions. It also deals a lot with Scripture and church teaching, but that's the fundamental. It's a presentation of the fundamentals of the Catholic faith. Now, it can be a little much, and there's also a shorter version known as the Compendium of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, which is much shorter, and it's just the essential points, and it's written in a Q&A format. But I would tend to recommend either getting the Catechism of the Catholic Church or the Compendium of the Catechism of the Catholic Church, and both of those are easily available for order. In terms of going to confession, I agree. Yeah, you need to go to confession. But in terms of should you do a general confession that applies to the entirety of your post-baptismal life, I would say that's up to you. If you think it would be spiritually beneficial to do a general confession, then you can do a general confession, but it wouldn't be necessary. All that's necessary for you to confess are any mortal sins you've committed since your last confession, whenever that was, and any sins that you from before that are mortal and that you have confidence were not properly confessed previously. And in making that latter determination, you should cut yourself slack, because there can be a tendency to foster scrupulosity if people start thinking, did I properly confess that, or was I really repentant? Assume you were. And unless you know for a fact that you had not repented of a sin, or unless you know for a fact that you had not properly confessed it, then assume you did. And all you really need to do under those parameters is just confess the mortal sins that haven't yet been confessed. If you think it would be beneficial to go beyond that, to do a more general confession, you can. Obviously, if you do a general confession, you want to set up an appointment for it. You don't want to just show up in line one Saturday and disrupt the procedure for everybody else there by springing a general confession on a priest unexpected. So, if you do want to do a general confession, you could call a priest and say, here's what I'd like to do. Can we set up a time for that? And that way, the priest and you can have the kind of time available to do it properly in a way that doesn't inconvenience other people.
Rob, thanks for the call. I just want to tack on to Jimmy's excellent suggestion that you should read the Catechism if you're trying to relearn basic Catholic teachings. If you or any other listeners in a similar situation are kind of more podcast people than book people, I mean, you're listening to Catholic Answers, so you might well be. Our good friends at Ascension have also produced a podcast called The Catechism in a Year, where Father Mike Schmitz, a great priest, he goes through it. It's divided up into 365 sections basically, and Father Mike Schmitz reads it through and helps explain some interesting or difficult passages. So, I mean, I listened to that podcast. I found it very helpful, even just reading along with Father Mike, reading it to me, or just listening to it in the car. So, again, if Rob or if you or anyone else wants to explore the Catechism in that way, that's available for free anywhere you get podcasts. All right, free shilling for Ascension is over. They do great work. I don't mind doing that. But we do want to also let you guys know that you can get 3 months of the Holy Habits app for free. This relative newcomer on the scene that we really like the work that they're doing. That provides you with tools to grow in holiness, modern tools to grow in holiness, but in ancient ways, basically. I read some of the services they offer earlier. I want to read a few more of them to you. Prayer reminders. This app can help you stay consistent with your spiritual commitments. It can link you to accountability groups that will help you stay motivated by encouraging one another in your pursuit of holiness. Iron sharpens iron and all that. It's really important to have someone keeping you accountable. Spiritual director connection. You can share weekly reports with your spiritual director, receive personalized messages to help you along. and easy habit logging. You can track your spiritual habits on the go by logging your progress through text messages. In today's busy world, Holy Habits provides structured, faith-based guidance to help Catholics build lasting spiritual habits and grow in holiness. And you can get 3 months of the Holy Habits app for free by going to Catholic.com and clicking on the banner at the top. Once again, that's Catholic.com. Click the banner at the top to find out how you can get 3 months of the Holy Habits app for free. We will be right back to wrap up this hour of Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin right after this.
This is Archbishop Paul Coakley, the Archdiocese of Oklahoma City, and you're listening to Catholic Answers Live.
Who was the first Catholic in your family? Were they evangelized by a friend, a coworker, a stranger? Did you ever think that you could be that person that God uses to save a soul? And that soul could save their family, their grandchildren, and generations to come. At St. Paul Street Evangelization, a Catholic nonprofit, we train, equip, and mobilize Catholic disciples to do the urgent work of evangelization. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization, streetevangelization.com.
The most original Catholic content is on EWTN Radio.
On Mother Angelica Answering the Call, Father Joseph and Doug Keck mine decades of phone calls answered by Mother Angelica. No subject is off limits and no problem too big for the wisdom and compassion of the one and only Mother Angelica.
Mother Angelica Answering the Call, Sunday afternoon, 2 Eastern, on EWTN Radio.
Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. My name is Thomas Graff, normally hosting the social media, but today I am filling in for Cy Kellett here on Catholic Answers Live. It's an Ask Me Anything, 2 hours of Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin. We're right smack in the middle of it, and the lines are full. I will give out the number. It's 888-318-7884, but as I said, the lines are full. Keep calling, though, because when people drop out, that's when calls come right in. Rob is, no, we just finished with Rob, sorry. Robert, calling from just up the road from us in Carlsbad, California, is listening on Sirius XM. Robert, you are next up with Jimmy Akin. Go ahead with your question.
Yes, thank you for taking my call, and this a comment that Catholic Answers I've listened to for quite some time, and I've really gained so much knowledge, and thank you for your show.
That's terrific,
Robert. Appreciated.
You're welcome.
So, my main question is about ashes. So I'm a Eucharistic minister in my parish, and we assisted the father in with ashes on this past Ash Wednesday, right? So he's given me permission to take the ashes with me because I also visit a juvenile detention center on Sundays. So my question is, can if they're a Protestant, a non-Catholic Christian, but they've been baptized, can they receive ashes? Is it proper for them to ask and receive ashes?
Yes, they are allowed to.
Question on a previous caller.
I'm sorry, what was the last bit, sir?
I had a follow-up question on the immigration. I had a comment on that. I have a little knowledge on it.
Okay, I'm afraid we don't really do comments on a Q&A show, but in terms of your question, it is not a problem for non-Catholics to receive ashes from Ash Wednesday. So if a non-Catholic would like to receive them, then go ahead and give it to them. It's not a problem.
Thanks for that call, Robert. Yeah, sorry, we do have a lot of questions to get through, so we do need to move on down the line to another Robert calling from Missouri. Listening.
This is like chain down the Roberts. This is three Roberts in a row.
It really is. Rob, Robert, and Robert again. First we had all YouTube listeners, and now we have all Roberts.
Ed, and Eddie.
Ed and Eddie. Nice poll, Jimmy. Very nice. Robert calling from Missouri, listening on 89.1. Third Robert in a row. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy Akin.
Yeah, so how does Aristotle's distinction between substance and accidents help explain the doctrine of transubstantiation?
Well, that's going to depend on exactly how you understand Aristotle's distinction here, and there are different ways of doing that. I would note that Aristotle's distinction is not actually used in church documents. It has been used by some theologians, such as St. Thomas Aquinas, to articulate transubstantiation, but it's not actually the language that the church uses. And so I prefer to stick to the language that the church uses rather than using the language of a particular philosophical school like Aristotelianism. Basically, the language that the church uses is substance and appearances rather than substance and accidents. Also, sometimes you'll see the term appearances rendered species, but that just means appearances. And so in philosophical jargon, a substance, at least in this context, refers to what a thing is. Then, and that's separate, then what does it appear to be? Well, okay, so in the case of transubstantiation, the substance is Jesus Christ. He's really truly and substantially present under the appearances of bread and wine. So prior to the transubstantiation, you had bread and wine. It was what it appeared to be. The substance was bread and wine, and it appeared to be bread and wine. And then when the transubstantiation happens, the substance of bread and wine becomes the substance of Jesus Christ. So what it is has now changed, but the appearances remain the same. The species or appearances of bread and wine are still the same, and so it still looks like bread and wine, even though that's no longer what it actually is.
Robert, did that help you out?
Yeah, thanks.
Great. Thank you for the question, Robert. Let's move on over to Staten Island, New York, right now, where Donnie is listening. Oh, this is cool. Donnie's listening on X, formerly known as Twitter. We started broadcasting. We just started live streaming the show on X a few months ago, I think, and we get a good number of viewers on there pretty much right away. I was very pleased to see that as the normal social media manager. Donnie, how long have you been tuning in on X? Do you do that every day?
Oh, no, just today.
Okay,
I figured out how to use it.
Hey, glad to have another one. Yeah, go ahead with the question,
and
Donnie.
I saw a live emblem, so I said, let me press that.
Yeah.
So actually, thanks for taking my call. I just have one question. Even a deacon friend of mine couldn't figure this out. So during the Eucharistic prayer, right? So the mystery of faith, which we sing it and proclaim it. But the one thing that it always kind of troubled me that when they use this verse, when we eat this bread and drink this cup, we proclaim your death, O Lord, until you come again. And there's no mention of the resurrection. So I don't know how you could rectify it as a mystery of faith. Do you know what I mean? So one would be we proclaim your death, O Lord, and profess your resurrection. The other one, save us, save the world by your cross and resurrection. But it seems like 90% of the time we use this mystery of faith. And I just why it just seems to me that we're singing it and we're proclaiming, but there's no mention of the resurrection when we do that.
Okay,
so it's not much of a mystery.
Well, no, there is a mystery. There are actually several mysteries there. So when we eat this bread and drink this cup, we proclaim your death, O Lord, until you come again. There's actually several different mysteries there. What a mystery is in a theological context is something that human reason alone cannot tell you. It's something that's revealed by God. And so if something is revealed by God that you couldn't deduce by reason alone, it's a theological mystery. And the mere fact that it's no longer bread and wine, but it has become Jesus Christ himself, that's a theological mystery. Also, it refers to when Jesus is going to come again. Well, that's something else that reason alone won't tell you, that there's going to be a second coming. That has to be revealed to us by God. And then there's the mystery of what happened during Jesus's death, the heroine of hell and so forth. That's something that's only touched upon lightly in the New Testament, but it deals with another theological mystery. The reason that this particular memorial acclamation is used frequently is it is almost a direct quotation of 1 Corinthians 11:26. And so we basically lifted a line from St. Paul here and are using it. What St. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 11:26 is, for as often as you eat this bread and drink this cup, you proclaim the death of the Lord until he comes. Basically, that got taken, and the Paul's second person pronoun, you, whenever you do this, becomes the first person plural pronoun, we, when we eat this bread and drink this cup. And then they've taken the third person reference to you proclaim the death of the Lord to we proclaim your death, O Lord. So we've made that a second person reference there. But basically, other than that, it's the same. And it refers to several theological mysteries.
Oh, that clears it up for me. I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Great. Glad to hear that, Donnie. Thanks so much for the call, and thanks so much for tuning in on X. I hope more people continue to do that. Let's move on down to Steve now, listening on YouTube. Steve, go ahead with your question for Jimmy Akin.
Hi, thanks you guys so much for taking my question. Basically, I'm in catechism class, and they're teaching that all temporal punishment is removed by going to confession. So if you just get out of confession, get hit by a car, you skip purgatory. It seems like from Carl Broussard's book and from the Catechism that temporal punishment is specifically there for forgiven sins, like do-over after sins are forgiven. So can you give clarification on whether confession removes temporal punishment?
Okay, Steve, I'm afraid that there was an internet interruption there for just a second. So I'm not sure I heard your entire I didn't hear your entire question, but let me do what I can with it, and then you tell me if I've done what you're looking for, because we're getting real close to the end of the show. The Catechism of the Catholic Church understands that so-called temporal punishments, and it kind of puts that in quotations, deal with disordered desires that remain even after we've been forgiven of a sin. And merely going to confession does not remove all of our disordered desires, and therefore it does not remove all of the so-called temporal punishments that that we have to deal with. If someone is claiming that they're all removed, they're going beyond what the church actually teaches.
Steve, is that what you were looking for?
Thank you so much. That answers my questions, and I really appreciate it. God bless.
Oh,
you too.
Perfect. Thanks so much for that call, Steve. This is, as Jimmy mentioned, we're getting close to the end of the show. But he will be back next hour for another whole 2 hours of, not 2 hours, for another 1 hour. We're almost through 1 hour so far. 1 hour of Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin. The number to call, there are 2 lines open now. The number to call is 888-318-7884. That's 888-318-7884. And Jimmy, I just want to ask you before this hour of the show, as I mentioned at the top of the hour, it is the first Friday of Lent, and so like fish is okay for us to eat. We're supposed to fast from meat, abstain from meat right now on Friday, but fish is okay. But I mentioned that, and I'm seeing this only for the first time, but like apparently capybara is okay to eat. Capybara meat is okay to eat. Do you know about this?
Not everywhere.
Okay.
But some aquatic mammals, because they live in the water, people in various locations have been given permission to consume them. Now, capybara are not native to North America, but here in North America, we have muskrat, which is another kind of aquatic mammal. And my understanding is in Michigan, there were Indian tribes that had been given permission to eat muskrat on Fridays of Lent, and that permission still exists. And so if you're in Michigan, you might have muskrat. But and there may be places where that's true of capybara. I've heard that, but I have not verified it.
So consult your Conference of Catholic Bishops, or rather your diocese, if you want to know about that. As I mentioned, it's Ask Me Anything. We're doing a whole other hour with Jimmy Akin. My name is Thomas Graff, filling in for Cy Kellett. I'll be filling in again next hour right here on Catholic Answers Live. Welcome back to Catholic Answers Live. Show's so nice, we got to do it twice. Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin is the topic of the day. We got through some great questions in the first hour, and this second hour, we're going to do the very same thing with our senior apologist, author, speaker, podcaster, host of Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World and the Jimmy Akin podcast. Jimmy Akin, are you ready to head through some more questions on this second hour?
Oh, sure.
Oh, sure. Let's do it. All right, Kathy, in Rochester, New York, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Kathy, thanks so much for downloading the app on your phone. What is your question for Jimmy Akin?
Hi. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So my question is about the Jubilee year and forgiveness of debts and stuff. And I'm going to state my question, and then you can ask for details. Does that apply to? So my ex-husband is in arrears in child support. Would it be not required, or I don't know, maybe virtuous if I let him off the hook for his past child support? Because it's hello, can you hear?
No, yes, we can hear you. What's your question?
So would the year of the Jubilee year require or not require or suggest that maybe I could forgive him his past due child support because it's a debt, because there's a thing about forgiving debt?
Okay, so we're dealing with two different institutions here. In the Old Testament, the life of ancient Israel was regulated such that they had a year that occurred every 50th year that was known as the Jubilee. And they also had a more limited celebration of that every 7th year. It wasn't called a Jubilee, but they did have a debt release provision that occurred on a periodic cycle in the calendar of ancient Israel. However, that was their law for their nation. That's not something that applies to us today in any direct way. Now, what the church has done is it has created a parallel institution that exists in the life of the church, where every 25 years there is a so-called Jubilee that is spiritual in nature, and there are various things that accompany the Jubilee, like the opening of holy doors in Rome and the ability to get a plenary indulgence by going on a pilgrimage either to the holy doors in Rome or, to parallel locations in your own diocese. But there isn't a requirement to release people from debts in the Christian Jubilee. That's forgiveness is always a Christian virtue, and you could argue that based on the biblical precedent that it's certainly appropriate for Christians to forgive, especially in a Jubilee year, but there's not a requirement that you release people from debts, and so that's up to you. If you want to release your ex from money that they owe you, whether it's child support or anything else, then you can do that. And that can be morally praiseworthy as long as you aren't releasing them from something that's going to materially injure the children. And what you have to do in looking at a situation like that is look at, the balance of goods. To what extent will releasing your ex of the debt help your ex? Because if he's just barely scraping by and that's the reason he's in arrears and he's under some crushing debt load, well, releasing him from part of that debt load or even all of it, that could really help him out. That could be a significant good there. On the other hand, that you need to look at what's that going to do to the state of your children. Is that going to deprive them of a benefit that they otherwise would be able to obtain if you didn't release him. And or maybe you don't need his help at this point, in which case maybe it's fine to release him. But you need to look at the good of the parties involved to figure out what's the best thing to do, and that's a matter of practical judgment that's not going to be the same in everybody's circumstances. And so I would suggest talking to a financial advisor, or talking to a pastor, or who knows your situation, or talking to an attorney or something like that, and seeing what, if anything, might be appropriate in this situation.
Kathy, did that help you out?
Okay.
Is that what you needed to hear?
It does. I just have just an aside. Are you guys ever going to start doing the Catholic Answers cruises again?
Well, my understanding is, those are things that do take place. I'm not sure what the current schedule is. I haven't been involved in that, but there hadn't been any decision made not to do them in the future.
Yeah, no, I believe, I think I've heard President Chris Check mention the Danube recently. No, the Rhine. Sorry, the Rhine. That's the one in Germany.
I think there hasn't been one since COVID.
COVID
kind of threw things in the loop.
We had one last year in Canada, New England.
You did? I didn't know that.
I don't think the website is set up just yet for. Is it? Oh yeah, CatholicCruise.com. CatholicCruise.com. If you want to see the one that we're doing for the Rhine later on this year, that's what you need.
Okay, that's a good idea to check with my priest or financial. Okay, thank you very much, and you have a very blessed day.
Thank you, Kathy. You as well. Thank you. Let's go now to John, calling all the way from the Emerald Isle. Gosh, I messed that up. Emerald Isle, Ireland.
Watching raise my Emerald Ire if you say it that way.
Boy, that was a pun worthy of Joe Heschmeyer, Jimmy. Very nicely done. John in Ireland. Sorry for butchering your island's nickname. What time is it over there, by the way?
Midnight.
Midnight. Wow. Okay, so you're technically calling from the future. Okay, Jimmy, we have a caller from the future here. I'm just kidding, John. Go ahead with your question.
My question is, can a Catholic simultaneously believe that Genesis is an allegory while believing in Luke's genealogy, considering it goes all the way back to Adam?
Okay, can you restate the question? I just want to make sure I heard it all correctly. Can a Catholic believe that Genesis is what?
An allegory.
An allegory. Well, okay, I would have to say the answer is yes, in that one reads genealogies according to the type of document that they are. And so is it possible to have an allegorical interpretation of Genesis and also do justice to Luke's genealogy of Jesus in Luke chapter 3? And yeah, there are ways you could do both. One of the things you find when you study ancient Near Eastern genealogies is they are not written the way modern genealogies are. Modern genealogies tend to be complete, and they tend to have biological links in them, and they although they may also have legal links. If someone is born to one set of parents and then they're adopted by somebody else, they'll be written into the family that receives them via adoption. Well, they had a parallel institution that was kind of like that in ancient Israel, where if you became an Israelite, then you were adopted into one of the tribes. And so even though, let's say you're joining the tribe of Judah, well, Judah may have died hundreds of years ago, but you're still going to get written into Judah's line. And so there is an element of ancient Hebrew genealogies that is not meant to be taken strictly literally, because this was just how ancient Near Eastern genealogies worked in Israel. And so for those generations that are covered by Genesis and also covered in Luke's genealogy, you could say, okay, well, we need to read these in terms of the kind of ancient Near Eastern genealogy that's provided here, and not just automatically assume that these are literal biological relationships. That could create conceptual space such that if you had an allegorical interpretation of Genesis, then those generations in Luke's genealogy would not be understood as fully literal biological relationships. The caution I would have is thinking of Genesis as all one thing or all the other. Genesis uses a variety of different genres, and to my mind, it would be a mistake to say, oh, Genesis is just an allegory. No, Genesis also has elements of history in it. Which parts of Genesis are more historical and which parts of Genesis are less historical is going to depend on where you are in the book. As Pope Pius XII noted in his 1950 encyclical Humanae Generis, the first 11 chapters of Genesis, which is before Abraham comes on the scene in chapter 12, they pertain to history in a real way, but they are written in Pope Pius's words in simple metaphorical language, and so though proper to a people but little cultured, to use a phrase he used. And so I would say that the early chapters of Genesis in particular are not written according to later historical conventions, and they are meant less literally, and there are additional elements of metaphor in those early chapters, and that's going to apply to the genealogies in those early chapters. But I wouldn't say Genesis is just an allegory. I think you need to use a finer grain than that in doing your analysis of Genesis, and different parts of the book have different relationships to history. In some parts of the book, particularly later, it has a tighter relationship to what we would consider history, and in some parts of the book, particularly early in the book, it has a looser, less literal relationship with history.
John, thanks so much for that call, all the way from across the pond in Ireland. Thanks for staying up past midnight, by the way. We're flattered that you did that to get your answer from Jimmy Akin, but now please get some sleep. I hope that answer was helpful to you, John, and call back anytime. I want to make another mention here of Holy Habits, the app that we're partnering with to give away for 3 months free. You can find out how you can get it for 3 months for free at Catholic.com. Go to Catholic.com and click the banner at the top. It's a Catholic spiritual growth app designed to help you grow in faith, develop virtues, track your spiritual progress, and it's rooted in time-tested principles of spiritual direction and the wisdom of the saints. And the fellow who leads it, the lead developer, owner of it, Drago, he is close by to us here in San Diego. He's come through the office a few times, was at our conference. Great stand-up guy, and he really knows what he's doing with this app, designing it to be a great user experience, but one that is also helping you cultivate the virtues, that will, God willing, help you become a saint. I mean, some of the reviews, I've got the Apple Store open right now. Some of the reviews for this Holy Habits app, it's got 4.7 out of 5 stars on average. And the reviews say words like exceptional and grateful and amazing app for living a holy life. So again, that is the Holy Habits app. If you want to find out what these people are talking about, as I said, visit Catholic.com and click the banner at the top to find out how you can get 3 months of the Holy Habits app just for you, all for free. It is Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin. 2 lines are open now, so if you want to ask Jimmy Akin a question, the number to call is 888-318-7884, 888-31-TRUTH. We will be right back to take more of your questions here on Catholic Answers Live.
Miss a show? Make sure to catch up by downloading the podcast, available online at Catholic.com.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Real Estate for Life. Real Estate for Life connects homebuyers and sellers to real estate agents while supporting pro-life organizations. On the web at realestateforlife.org.
Underwriting for Catholic Answers Live is provided by Magnificat. Published monthly, Magnificat features texts of daily Mass, prayers, articles, meditations, art commentaries, and more, in step with the liturgical rhythm of the Church, on the web at magnificat.com.
EWTN, teaching the truth.
I
I did not grow up religious. This morning, as I was chaotically driving around looking for a COVID testing site, I actually saw your radio station on somebody's car in front of me. Something told me to listen up, and so I switched up to the station and just started listening. And now here I am on the phone talking to you guys.
Catholic Answers Live, Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin rolls on here on a Friday. My name is Thomas Graff. I'm filling in for Cy Kell today. Taking a break from my social media duties. As I mentioned before, we had a caller who was watching on X, formerly Twitter. We also, we do live stream on Facebook. We live stream on YouTube. So if you're listening on any other platform, and any of those would be more convenient to you. Also, Catholic.com, and that's actually powered by Twitch. So Catholic.com, Twitch, YouTube, Facebook, X, and as you heard at the beginning of the ad break there, also podcasts. You can download each show after it airs and listen to the podcast. Those are all the ways that you can get Catholic Answers live, either live or after the fact. As I said, it's Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin. Number is 888-318-7884 if you want to call. All the lines are filling up again. So Will in Georgia, we're going to take your question next. Will is watching on YouTube, as I just mentioned. And go ahead with your question, Will, for Jimmy Akin.
Hello. So my question was on defending the teaching on salvation. And let me find it real quick. So the Catholic Church is pretty clear that we must teach depending on the recipient and kind of personalized to them. And I know in your book, because you have a great book, Jimmy, that justification and salvations it's not just a one-sentence answer, and it's pretty complex. And so when we're given the common opposition by Protestants that, the Catholic view of salvation is, too complex and that's just a long list of do's and don'ts, when we respond, should we try to simplify the answer and, give like a quick list of like, first you need to be baptized in faith, then stay in this state of grace? Or should we kind of push back and say, salvation, it's not just a simple, one step process where you just raise your hand and say faith and explain that's a complex process. So what is the best way about approaching this issue?
Well, it's going to depend on the situation, but fundamentally, you can present any system of salvation in a way that makes it look simple, and you can present any system of salvation, including the various Protestant ones, in ways that make them look complex, because there are complexities to all of them. Like, for example, what about the salvation of non-Christians? What about the salvation of people who have mental handicaps? What about the salvation of children who have not been baptized? There are all kinds of different situations that you can make someone's system look complex if you insist on pressing it. But you can also present the Catholic understanding of salvation in an extremely simple way. If someone wants to be saved, well, there are three things that the New Testament says they should do: repent, believe, and be baptized. And then beyond that, don't commit mortal sin. What if someone commits mortal sin? Well, we can deal with that in one sentence too: repent, believe, and go to confession. So you can present the essence of the Catholic view in one sentence if you just say repent, believe, and be baptized. You can present it in two sentences if you say repent, believe, and be baptized. And if you commit mortal sin, then repent, believe, and go to confession. Now, that doesn't address every conceivable question one might ask about salvation. But the same thing is going to be true of any parallel system that's being proposed in the Protestant community as well. And there are a whole bunch of different proposals that have been made in the Protestant community, and you can make any of them look complex if you just insist on asking additional questions. But in terms of just having a basic presentation, you can also have a very simple one.
Will, thanks so much for that question. By the way, Jimmy, Will mentioned that he was reading one of your books. Was that the Drama of Salvation that he was referring to that had that line that he talked about?
Could be,
probably.
I've written several books connected with salvation, including some in the 20 Answer series.
Oh, sure, that makes sense. Well, yeah, I mean, the Drama of Salvation is one of Jimmy's more extensive looks at the Catholic view of salvation. You can find that at shop.catholic.com if you want to dive into that more. Will or any other listeners? I mean, Will might have been reading it. Who knows? Moving on to Detroit, Michigan. Christine is listening to the show. Christine, what is your question for Jimmy Akin?
Good evening. Thanks so much for taking my call. I got an email today from a friend saying that the Vatican has suppressed the Miles Christi order. And I've never heard that term before, and I wasn't sure what it meant. And then I'm scheduled, because they have a location here in Detroit, scheduled to attend a conference of theirs next weekend. And I thought one of their priests was going to be saying Mass at the start of the conference, and I didn't know if that was impacted at all.
Well, I wouldn't know. So Miles Christi, you said you didn't know what it meant. It's Latin for Soldier of Christ, and it's an organization that was founded by a South American priest, and he later was credibly accused.
Oh, no, I know
and
what Miles Christi's is. Sorry to interrupt you. I didn't know what the order being suppressed meant. Like, what is the
that means it's just
of the Vatican suppressing?
That means it's being disbanded. It's not going to exist going forward.
Okay. So if the bishop allows them to say Mass in the diocese, then that would be okay?
Well, I don't know. I haven't read the order. And so the order of suppression is going to contain information about implementation that I don't have access to. For all I know, it might say the order is going to be shut down in 6 months, or it might say the order is going to be shut down immediately. It may have provisions that say what's going to happen to, people who are currently members of it. They may need time to be incarnated if they're a priest in a new diocese or something like that. I'm told that they have like a year to make arrangements. That may be true. I haven't seen that, but in terms of this conference you mentioned that's just coming up in a week or so, I wouldn't really worry about it. The local bishop is going to have that in hand, and if he allows a priest from Miles Christi to say Mass, then it'll be fine.
Christine, did that help you out?
Really helpful. And yeah, just one quick comment about muskrat. So my husband and son actually attended a all-you-can-eat muskrat dinner a few years ago south of Detroit. And I guess all I'll say is that they didn't go up for seconds, and they've never been back since.
Okay, so it might actually be more penitential than not to eat muskrat on Friday. Is that what you're saying?
It might be.
It might be. Okay, well, thanks for that little tidbit, Christine, and thanks for your question. Please do call back anytime you like. Moving on now to Columbia, South Carolina, where Michael is watching on YouTube, joining the bevy of YouTube callers on today's show. Michael, you are on the air. Go ahead with your question for Jimmy Akin.
Hey, Jimmy. Hey, I have a kind of a philosophical question.
Hey, what's your question?
I've been definitely learning a lot about my faith, but my question is, can knowledge or truth of the faith ever become an idol?
Sure. Yeah. If you care more about learning about the faith, acquiring knowledge about the faith, then you care about God himself, then it's become an idol for you. God himself is the source of all good. He is infinitely good. He is infinitely loving. And if you love something more than God, then whatever that thing is you love more than God has effectively become an idol for you. And so if you love studying about the faith more than you love God, and you don't recognize that he's your ultimate priority, then yeah, it would be something that is serving as the functional equivalent of an idol.
Michael, did that help you out?
That did. And I'm certainly not saying that I think that applies to me, but I notice myself when I'm either reading scripture or learning about things that sometimes I tend to lose focus, and then I kind of have to just pray about it and get back to, like,
Sure.
This isn't about a debate,
Yeah.
This is about Jesus.
Yeah, and I wouldn't be too scrupulous here, though. It's okay to be excited about learning about the faith and defending the faith and all that stuff, but it is possible for someone to care more about that than about God, and you shouldn't do that.
Thanks for that call, Michael. 2 lines open now to talk to Jimmy Akin. Call 888-318-7884 if you'd like to join us on Ask Me Anything. We'll be right back with more of Catholic Answers Live right after this.
Have you ever wondered about the mysterious, even obscure aspects of the Catholic faith? Dive into the Jimmy Akin podcast, where Jimmy brings together information from many fields as he pushes the boundaries of apologetics. Tune in today to the Jimmy Akin podcast, Mysteries of the Faith, a highly entertaining, informative, and at times humorous show that will help you grow in your faith. Visit JimmyAkinPodcast.com today to subscribe.
Lots of people have big questions about Catholicism. It needs a big book of answers, and now it's got one. The Big Book of Catholic Answers is filled with helpful replies to more than 250 questions about the faith. Questions about God, salvation history, the Creed, the Bible, the list goes on and on. Order your copy of the Big Book of Catholic Answers today at shop.catholic.com or ask for it at a good Catholic bookstore near you.
We hope that one of the things that we communicate here at Catholic Answers Live is that our Catholic faith allows us to be fully serious about all the problems we encounter in the church and in the world, but it also lets us have light hearts and maybe even mix in a bit of fun, and that is exactly what our good friend Joe Heschmeyer does in his popular podcast, Shameless Popery. You should check it out at shamelessjoe.com. Joe's got a deep grasp of the faith, morals, the teachings of the church, all that, but he's also got a witty conversational style. He entertains and he informs, but you will leave equipped to better answer the most common challenges, misconceptions, and questions about the Catholic faith. He's got insightful guests, he does on-air debates, and he takes a close look into all the things that you want to know about as a Catholic living today. You'll walk away knowledgeable and filled with joy. Look for Joe on his YouTube channel. Check him out at shamelessjoe.com or wherever you get your podcasts. And if you like what you hear, become a patron.
Groovy music time as we hit the halfway point on this hour of Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin. My name is Thomas Graff. I am filling in for Cy Kellett, taking a break from my social media duties to do so. I will be right back at it on Monday. And I forgot, guys. Is Cy going to be back on Monday? Is he going to be back? He is. Okay, cool. So, yeah, you don't have to deal with me on Monday. You just have to deal with me for another half hour today. 888-318-7884 is the number to call. The lines are all full. So, Jimmy, we're just going to jump right back into calls. Rich is calling from Cincinnati, Ohio, listening on the Catholic Answers app. Rich, what is your question for Jimmy Akin?
Okay, so a couple weeks ago, I was teaching our OCIA class about the last things, and I was prepared for all kinds of questions about purgatory. And when we got there, that actually went pretty smooth. But where they kind of stuck me was up front when I was explaining about the particular judgment and the general judgment and how those work from a time perspective. And one of the guys kind of pushed me. He's like, well, so everyone has a particular judgment when they die? And I'm like, yes. And he's like, well, then they have a general judgment at the end of time. He's like, do they participate in that too? And I'm like, yeah. And he's like, so what do they do in between? And I'm like, well, you go to heaven or hell as soon as you have a particular judgment. He's like, well, you're then pulled back out. And it kind of, the way they kind of started to sound a little silly. And I'm like, well, there has to be something here. So I'm not sure how it works. So I had my own theory, but I'd love to hear what you say, Jimmy, and then if there's time, maybe I'll tell you how I answered, and you can tell them if I totally led them astray or not.
Okay, so there are two principal differences between the general judgment and the particular judgment that occurs at the end of our lives. The first general difference is that at the general judgment, we're going to have our bodies back. And so it occurs after the resurrection of the dead, and therefore it brings a new dimension to our final fate. So, if after the particular judgment we're assigned to go to heaven, then we may need to go to purgatory first. But once we get to heaven, we're going to be glorified in soul, because we don't have our body with us. So our soul is the only thing to be glorified. On the other hand, if we go to hell after the particular judgment, then we're going to be damned in soul, because our soul's all we got at that point. But after the resurrection of the dead, we'll have our bodies back. And so after the general judgment, it will, if we were assigned to go to heaven at the particular judgment, then we will now be glorified not only in soul, but also in body. And if we are assigned to go to hell, then we would be damned not only in soul, but also in body. So having our bodies back brings a new dimension and a new fullness to our final fate, whether that's positive or negative. The other principal difference is that that the general judgment is going to be public. What happens at someone's particular judgment when they die is not generally known. I don't know what happened at the particular judgments of the people who have died in my life. That's something I don't have access to in this world. But Jesus does tell us that whatever we've whispered in the darkness is going to be shouted from the rooftops and, at the judgment. And so there will be a public aspect to the general judgment where we see the justice and the justice and mercy of God are both being done perfectly, so that he ends up being perfectly just and perfectly merciful. And that will be demonstrated in a more public way than what happens at the particular judgment. There's also what looks like a third difference between the general judgment and the particular judgment, and that is that it doesn't look like purgatory is going to continue beyond the general judgment. Any purgation that needs to get taken care of will be completed, even if it's in the twinkling of an eye. It'll happen. It'll be taken care of before the end of the general judgment. So that's different than the particular judgment at the end of this life.
Rich, thank you for the call. We do have a lot of people on the line, so I'm afraid we do need to move on. But thank you for calling, and please do call again if you want to have a follow-up question answered. Rory is calling from Easton, Pennsylvania, listening also on the Catholic Answers app. Rory, you are on the air. What is your question for Jimmy Akin?
Hi, thank you for taking my question. What does it mean for God to forget the sins forgiven in confession if he's omniscient? Can't he look back in time or examine the effects and other things of a sin and sort of piece together what the sin actually was?
Who told you that God forgets sins that have been confessed?
It was the perhaps apocryphal story of Joan of Arc, where she asked God what the king had last confessed, and God said that he didn't remember. And then also, I believe I read that in the diary of Saint Faustina.
Okay.
That there was a very similar thing.
Any such language used at any point in church history is metaphorical. God, as you point out, is omniscient. That means he knows everything, and he doesn't have to piece stuff together. He just knows everything. And so he knows every sin that every person has ever confessed. He knew it before they even confessed it. And he can't reach into his brain, because he doesn't have a brain, and rip out that knowledge. He can't truncate his own omniscience. And so God always knows everything that's true. And consequently, he always knows every sin that has ever been committed. And he does not literally forget any sin just because it's been confessed. Now, people may use metaphorical language to say, oh, God doesn't remember our sins or something like that, but that's a metaphor. That is not literally true. What that language means is that he forgives the sin, but and figuratively you can speak of him forgetting it. We have that forgive and forget expression in English, and there may be parallel expressions in other languages, but God does not literally forget anything ever.
Thanks for that call, Rory, and please do call again. We have 2 lines open now for Jimmy Akin. That is 888-318-7884 is the number to call for this Ask Me Anything hour, 888-318-7884. Philip now calling from Los Angeles, California. Another one watching on X. Thanks so much for joining us on our social media over there, Philip. What is your question for Jimmy Akin?
Hi, Jimmy. So I've noticed that a lot of Catholic apologetics focus mostly on Protestants, which is understandable. But I'm Russian and I'm cradle Orthodox. So I haven't seen a lot of arguments against Orthodoxy specifically. So, for example, people will argue against sola scriptura, and I'm like, yeah, I agree, but what is the argument against Orthodoxy? And I'm very open to becoming Catholic, but I am very much plagued with doubts, and I have not seen that one argument that would completely convince me of the truthfulness of the Catholic faith. So I guess my question is quite simple. Like, what would you give me as your best argument for me to become Catholic?
Well, I would say that I would refer you to a piece that I wrote a number of years ago, because in becoming Catholic, I was coming in from a Protestant background, and I had to look at, okay, so I'm moving in a more traditional direction in Christianity. Do I need to become Catholic or do I need to become Orthodox? And so I had to work through that issue, and I ended up writing a piece a number of years ago called Why I Am Not Eastern Orthodox. So if you Google Why I Am Not Eastern Orthodox and my name, Jimmy Akin, that should come up for you. But basically, I would focus on 2 principal arguments. The first one is the real nub of the issue between Catholics and Orthodox is, what's the role of the Pope? There are a few other issues that need to be looked at and so forth, but that's the real nub of the issue. What is the role of the Pope? Well, both Catholics and Orthodox can agree that the Bishop of Rome is the successor of Peter in a unique sense. The question is then what's his role in the church? And in Eastern Orthodoxy, it's common to say, well, he's a primus inter pares, which is a fancy Latin phrase that means a first among equals. So he has what's sometimes called a primacy of honor. But that concept of a primacy of honor, it is a post-biblical concept that is not something that would have made sense to ancient Israelites. If God gave you authority, he didn't just give you honor with no authority attached. And so the idea of a first among equals who lacks, we can say, yeah, sure, there's an equality between Peter and the rest of the apostles as apostles, but what makes Peter first is something substantive. It goes beyond merely him having extra honor and, get to wear a fancy uniform or something like that the other apostles don't get to wear. If in the biblical conceptualization of authority, you have real authority if God gives you authority. And so I think that the idea of a purely honorific role for the Pope is something that just doesn't correspond to the way that the biblical mind thought about authority. Also, and this is something I've talked about periodically, but it occurred to me that there's a parallel between the role of Jerusalem and its temple in the Old Testament and the role of the papacy in the church. Both the North and the South in Israel, because over there politics is always turned around. So the North seceded from the South instead of vice versa. But the 10 northern tribes acknowledged that there was a temple in Jerusalem, but they said instead of worshiping there, the northern tribes should worship on Mount Gerizim in the territory of the 10 northern tribes. On the other hand, Jews said, no, God authorized Jerusalem as the place where God's temple is to be, and that's where we need to worship. So you had this institution of the Jerusalem temple in the Southern Kingdom, and it was the Southern Kingdom that God guided into the correct understanding of that institution. He did not guide the Northern Kingdom into the correct understanding of the Jerusalem temple. And so that sets a precedent for if you have an institution that is of divine, if you have an institution that God himself set up, and you've got a division of opinion about what's the proper role of this institution, God is more likely to guide the group that has the institution into a correct understanding of it compared to a different group that does not have the institution. Just like the Southern Kingdom was guided into a correct understanding of the role of the Jerusalem temple and the Northern Kingdom was not. Well, in the same way, both Catholics and Orthodox can agree that the Pope is a unique successor of Peter. So there is this institution of something that can be called the papacy. The question is then which group is going to be guided into a correct understanding of the role of the papacy? Is it going to be the group that has the papacy, or is it going to be the group that does not have the papacy? Well, I would argue that just like God guided the Southern Kingdom into a correct understanding of the role of the temple, in the same way, God has guided Catholics into a correct understanding of the role of the Pope. And so that's kind of an a priori argument based on, okay, who is God more likely to guide? The people who are in union with an institution, or the people who are that he created, or the people who are in separation from that institution? And when you couple that with the fact that the biblical mind did not understand the concept of a primacy of honor without accompanying an authority, I think that creates a strong argument for a Catholic understanding of the papacy and a reason why one would want to become Catholic. And that's why I became Catholic.
Philip, thanks so much for that call. In addition to the article Jimmy mentioned that he wrote, titled Why I Am Not Eastern Orthodox, definitely check that out. We do also have a book that we recently published through Catholic Answers Press called Answering Orthodoxy, which goes through a number of challenges from from Orthodox. So, Philip, if you hang on the line, just give your information to the call screener, and we will send that along to you free of charge if you like. I want to tell you guys one more time about this Holy Habits app that we're partnering with. It's a Catholic spiritual growth app designed to help you grow in faith, develop virtues, track your spiritual progress. Virtue is a habit, and so you might say it's a holy habit. So I think that's probably where Drago got the name for the app, if you can believe it. But it is. I've told you about the habit recommendations, the gospel reflections, confession logging, all these things. I've run through the list, but I wanted to tell you I've looked up some of the reviews for this app, and one of them just really says it better than I could. One person reviewing the Holy Habits app on the Apple Store said, "I cannot emphasize how much this app has helped me. It was a long journey of searching and asking God to show me what I needed to work in my spiritual life. I downloaded this app, but I was surprised on how accurate it was when it showed me the vices I needed to work on and why, and which virtue I needed to develop or strengthen to get rid of those vices. It was as if I had this plan developed by a spiritual director that has known me for several years. It has been hard work, but I finally have a goal in mind, knowing what I am fighting against." Glowing review for the Holy Habits app. And if you go to Catholic.com and click the banner at the top of our website, you can find out how to get 3 months of that Holy Habits app all for free. Go to Catholic.com, click the banner at the top. We'll tell you how to get 3 months of Holy Habits app all for free. We will be right back with more Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin right after this.
There's only one Catholic Answers Live.
The Catechism defines evangelization as the proclamation of Christ and His gospel by word and the testimony of life. But what does that look like in real life? It looks like St. Paul street evangelists out in the public square sharing the good news. We're a Catholic nonprofit that starts conversations by handing out free sacramentals. Then we employ our method of listen, befriend, proclaim, and invite. Catholic Answers is supported in part by St. Paul Street Evangelization. Visit streetevangelization.com to learn more.
Hey, this is Michael O'Neill, the Miracle Hunter. I'll be delving into the fascinating world of miracles and taking you on a hunt that explores the greatest mysteries and marvels of the Catholic Church. I'll be examining what constitutes a miracle, how miracles are investigated and approved, and the role they play in the lives of the faithful. We'll look at the miracles of the Gospels and early Christianity, considering the claims of the miraculous in our own modern age.
The Miracle Hunter, tomorrow at 1 p.m. and 7 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio.
Back to Catholic Answers Live. Ask Me Anything with Jimmy Akin, rolling right along on this first Friday of Lent. My name is Thomas Graff. I'm taking a break from my social media duties to fill in for Cy Kellett, who will be back with you on Monday. So don't you worry about him. He will be back and ready to host again this Monday. Meanwhile, we are going to keep getting through as many questions as we can for Jimmy Akin from your calls. Holly is calling from Missouri, watching on YouTube. Holly, you are on the air. Go ahead with your question.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I am currently in OCIA, and my husband is still Protestant, and I just didn't know what they say about, like, if I still would attend church with him. Like,
well, you're welcome to attend church. You're welcome to attend church with him if that's what you need to do. That's fine. You also, upon becoming Catholic, you need to, do what you can to fulfill your Sunday obligation as a Catholic, which you could do either on a Sunday or the evening of the preceding day. But there are a lot of families where you have one spouse who's Catholic and one spouse who's not, and they may go to both services on a given weekend.
Holly, does that help you out?
it does. I appreciate that. Thank you. Have a wonderful day.
Perfect.
You too.
Thank you for the call, Holly, and best of luck in OCIA. We will be praying for you as you continue your journey into the Catholic Church. Drew is calling from, I believe that's Iowa, listening on Sirius XM. Drew, go ahead with your question for Jimmy Akin.
Yes, thank you. I once had a priest explain eternal damnation to me in a new way, and I'd like some clarification. So he said that if we were allowed to go to heaven and experience the beatific vision with grave sin on our soul, that would be more painful than going to hell. So it is out of God's mercy that he allows us to go to hell. And that's a new framework for that for me. So could you potentially explain that mindset? Thank you.
Well, I mean, he explained his view of things, and it's a permitted view. The church doesn't have a teaching on this matter, so we're into an area of theological speculation. His is one possible speculation. It is not the only possible speculation. Another one would be to say that God allows all of us to see him as he is. And if we have charity or love in our soul, then we will experience the vision of God as a beatific vision, as something that makes us happy. On the other hand, if we have excluded charity from our soul, then when we see God as he is, it will be a miserific vision. It will make us miserable to see God as he truly is and how loving he is when we are unloving people. So that's another way. Now, in the model that your priest friend proposed, God positively excluded people from heaven to keep them from seeing him, and that was an act of mercy. On the model that I just mentioned, where God does not stop people from seeing him as he is, it's just our reaction to him based on whether or not we have charity in our souls or love in our souls. It's that makes the difference. It's our reaction, not whether we actually see God or not. And there are other possible models too. I mean, the whole idea of, Revelation uses the image of a lake of fire, and God is a king that's having people thrown into this lake of fire. That's another model too. So what the church teaches is that being lost is a real possibility, but exactly how that works and how it's to be understood in terms of God's mercy. We know God is merciful, but there are different ways of trying to put the pieces together. And your priest friend has proposed one model, but it's not the only possible model.
Drew, does that help you?
Certainly, thank you. He's a very smart man, and I'm glad to know that that is one possible model. Thank you.
You're welcome, Drew. Thanks for the call. Call back anytime. Moving on down now to moving on over rather from Iowa to Michigan.
Can't get too far down in Michigan.
No, you certainly cannot. Listening on the Ave Maria app, we have Al. Al, welcome to the show. What is your question for Jimmy Akin?
Yes. Thank you for taking my call and question. Thanks for both of you and Jimmy Akin for the great work he does. Anyway, so I'm asking about atonement. How does our Blessed Lord atone for our sins, especially in light of substitutionary atonement? I heard, without mentioning names, because from two good Catholic apologists, one says substitutionary atonement is not totally unaccepted by the Church because it's very Calvinistic and not biblical. And someone said, no, it has roots even in some Church Fathers, and maybe Isaiah, he took our sins and shame. I'm paraphrasing, of course. So it can be, does the Church has a theory about how does the Lord atone for our sin? Or you can use all theories, especially substitutionary atonement?
Okay, so the church does not have a single theory about how the atonement works, and therefore it's open to a range of possibilities. Some theories are not going to work, but there are a range of them that will, and the church is actually pretty open on this question. There is actually more than one theory of substitutionary atonement. For example, St. Anselm of Canterbury, in his book Cur Deus Homo, or Why the God-Man, he actually articulates a version of the atonement that does involve substitution, but it is not what's called penal substitution. Penal substitution is the idea that is proposed in Calvinistic circles, and you mentioned Calvin or Calvinists. The idea penal means punishment, and so the idea of penal substitution is not that Christ was somehow our substitute, but that he was our substitute in punishment. And so God literally punished Jesus instead of punishing us. That is not a view that has been well received in Catholic circles because it seems manifestly unjust. I mean, Jesus is infinitely holy, and you can't literally punish an infinitely holy person, an infinitely innocent person. And so that creates a problem for penal substitution, but it does not create a problem for other models that also involve substitution. For example, and I'll have to be brief with this because we're coming down to the end of the show, but the model that to my mind seems to most clearly be presented in Scripture is a sacrificial substitutionary model where Christ is a substitute on us in the mode of a sacrifice. So he's our Passover lamb. He's the Lamb of God. And so he offers his life to God as a sacrifice of love on our behalf, but he's not being punished on the cross. Instead, he's doing something loving for us on the cross, and God accepts that as a sacrifice of love.
Al, thanks so much for that call. Sorry to all the callers who we could not reach this hour, but please do call again anytime you like. Jimmy Akin, thank you so much for 2 great hours of Ask Me Anything today.
My pleasure.
That's the Jimmy Akin Podcast and Jimmy Akin's Mysterious World, available wherever you guys listen to podcasts. And Again, Jimmy Akin is purveyor of great mysteries of the faith and of the world at large, so definitely check those out if you're interested. Thanks so much for hanging with me for 2 hours. Psych Out will be back on Monday. You all have a great weekend. We'll see you right back here, God willing, on Catholic Answers Live.